Here we are at an original staircase from 1847, leading from the ground floor upstairs. In this photograph, you can see the original staircase leading downstairs that was lost in the 1980s. Now the staircase leading downstairs has been reinstated. How do we get this final look?
The joiner has done a fantastic job of building the stairs. He's used a really good cut of Australian red cedar. Then I've come in, I've sanded it, coloured it to match the staircase upstairs, and then French polished it. So let's have a look at that process. The first thing we're going to look at doing is sanding the stairs, and that will be done by hand rather than machine sanding, as there are lots of multiple little surfaces on the stairs and it's hard to get a sanding machine in there and create a good finish. The purpose of sanding is to put as many scratches in the surface as possible. The more scratches, the glossier and the refined and clearer the surface will become. Over the years, my preference has become to use starting at 180 grit sandpaper. Everyone has a slightly different way in which they like to use the numbers of papers that they use. For me, it's 180 to start with. Once I've then done 180, you've then flattened the surface. The cedar will sand quite quickly at 180 grit. Next paper after that I like is 240 grit, and that's to remove the scratches of 180 grit. Then after that 320, and then after wetting down the timber to raise the grain, I like to use 400 grit. Also when sanding, it's important not to be scrubbing the surface, definitely not across the grain. In line with the grain down, sand and stroke sanding. It looks a bit slower, but it's not. It's actually an effective way to go. So we've done the 320 sanding. We're down to wetting the surface out. I like to use, this is a soft badger hair brush, and I also use a cloth just for wiping out and picking up excess water. From here, just working it in. This will pick up light bits of sawdust as well, but that's okay. Taking into the vertical surfaces, make a dribble. I like to pick it up with the cloth and spread it. Now that I've got it wet, I can leave it wet, which won't hurt, to let the water just keep swelling the timber. But I do like to straighten out the brush strokes that I've put in it. I can just use a cloth to pick up if I've made too much water. We've reached the sanding of 320 grit. We've wet the stairs down and raised the grain. I'm just going to go in with 400 grit. I like to fold it into 3 when I'm going around curves. And from here, there's only a slight amount of fur in the grain, so that's all we're going to remove. So from here, it's just a case of getting a curve and running it off. Where there are attachment nails, they need to be below the surface of the timber so they can be later filled and not seen. There's a couple of large holes in the timber, and I like to fill that with button lac with the soldering iron. Clean it off with a chisel, and then it polishes in with itself with the shellac to finish. In applying the shellac, I'm going to start with the treads and then work my way up to the top of the handrails, so that if there are any dribbles or runs or little flicks of shellac that come off the top surface and they land on this, they'll already be shellac and it won't create a spot stain. I want to get it reasonably wet when I'm putting the shellac on, but not running, and straightening out with the grain. Where we're up to today is we've sanded the seal coat, and that's come up quite sharp, and we're just cutting that down, not through the shellac, but just enough to get it nice and soft. The other thing we've done is we've gone through and put a putty in all the tiny little nail holes that have been left with brads in them. From there, we're then going to go through and just wipe down and remove the dust. This is the original staircase with its shellac finish on it. And this is the colour we're matching. And we've done a colour sample to match this. We're then moving into what is a stain over the shellac. If we go in with the stain directly into the timber, it will grab quite strongly and be quite dark. By putting a coat of shellac and sealing the timber first, we've managed to allow the stain to just be gentle on the surface. And what we're using is black Japan. We'll just be applying that into the corners, and then we'll wipe it back And the purpose of wiping it back is so that it gets trapped in the corners. As it gets trapped in the corners, it will just give us a depth and the overall appearance of the staircase. Today we're up to the stage where we have done the staining, and we've also just given the staircase a coat of shellac. The next part is to go around and we'll find there are some little dots where the filler hasn't matched correctly, and we'll be just colouring those out. For doing that, I'm working with shellac and pigments. For me, the shellac is the ideal solvent and binder for pigment, and that forms it's like paint. As you can see here, where some filler's gone over the holes, and we've put some colour and polish over it, but it's still a little bit catching to the eye. So we're just using a touch of darker colour because the eye doesn't get caught by a darker colour, and that's it. The next part is to start polishing the staircase with shellac, and we'll also be using linseed oil as part of the process. My shellac, I usually make my shellac quite thick, and then on site I cut it with some alcohol to thin it. I have my oil, which I have a tiny hole in the top for actually feeding as I need it, and the rubber I use for polishing, which has been used and is a little bit tight, so I want to break it open and loosen the inner fabric, which has become dense from being used. And at this stage I don't want to make a new one, I'm just happy to use the one that I have. Making the shape, I want it round and I want to point. Fold it, turn it back on itself, and that's my rubber ready to use. From there I'm doing soft rubber technique, which means that I've got the slight amount of dampness in it. Not completely wet, I certainly don't want the shellac running out of it. And from there I can apply oil directly to there, which is for vertical surfaces, or I can apply the oil directly to the timber. So for getting into the very thin areas, you can either use a brush, go over that with the rubber, or I can thin it out, and that will travel up inside those lines quite nicely so that I can get the shellac on all surfaces. And that shellac's become quite strong to pull on and sticky, but the oil stops it grabbing. And of course the oil becomes part of the finish because it's linseed oil as opposed to some of the other oils which we could use, and it forms linoleic acid bond in the shellac itself, which makes it much stronger. To finish the staircase is a William Morris wallpaper.